I apologize if I clickbaited you with the title, but this is not a lie, this is not bait, this is not anything like that. This is a real thing, and I'll prove it. For those who don't care about like all the little nitty-gritty things, like why this could be the case and everything, the trick is just holding S and D and handbrake turning at the same time, instead of just holding A to turn around. Doesn't work the other way around for some reason. Holding A and S makes you turn slower, and then just holding D, because it does a wider turn. But if you hold SD and handbrake, you will turn faster in the majority of tanks than by just holding A. So I don't get why, but that's why. Anyways, that's the brief version. Let's dive a little deeper into it. I'm going to show a lot of comparisons just so people don't think, oh, he's imagining things, and I'm just saying, look, it's faster when it looks faster. No, we can easily time this out. It's about 25% faster, which is just absurd for something free that is simply just by pushing 2 buttons, which is made even weirder by the fact that it's only those 2 buttons. It doesn't work with A and S, it doesn't work with W and D. Pushing W while handbrake turning doesn't do anything. So that's why this is weird. But no, it's not just me saying, oh look, it's faster. It actually is faster. When you time it out, over time, this gets way quicker. Obviously, you're not going to be spinning in a circle for a minute, but you can see how this makes you go 25% faster. Let me give you a more realistic example. I don't think anybody would consider the Basante to be one of the fastest tanks in the world, but specifically not while it's traversing for sure. And as you can see, it goes considerably faster. And if we pause it, all we have to do is measure that gap there, and that's how much percent faster we turn. It's not going to be exact because Gene forgot to stop in the same place as he started, but you get the point. I found this with Racer, and we tried testing out some more tanks. It works in the T55A, and it works in the KPZ-07, even though it's a 3rd gear tank, because it's fast enough. It works in the IS-7 and the Basante, as well as the VK4502B. It doesn't work in the TVP 5051, but it does work in the E75 TS, spinning it considerably faster than before. I was very surprised with that one. And it works in the TOG, as if this couldn't get any more confusing. It works in the T100, but it actually goes a little slower, as well as it just spins a super wide angle, so I don't know how useful that one would be. It does work in the UDES 1516 very nicely, as well as the VZ55 barely. It doesn't work in any tank destroyers, but it does work in the Tornwagen, which is considerably slow. Then there's what happens with tanks like this. This is a strange thing. It's only happened on 3 tanks so far, actually 4. The TVP 5051, the FZM 50T, the Klandwang, and the PZ1C. It just dies out when you try this trick. Doesn't matter if it's 3rd gear or 1st gear turning, but for some reason, if it keeps going, it will eventually just flatten out and continue off in straight lines and be drastically affected by the slightest incline or decline. It actually looks kind of funny because it looks like a tank moonwalk, because one track doesn't move. For you anyways, it moves for everybody else. Certain tanks turn so fast that they don't need any help from the system, including the T-71s. Like, come on, this tank does not need any help traversing faster. Although it is kind of funny to watch this thing lurch around going in reverse, even though it makes it go slower if you don't do this. Because just look at this thing. It serpentines around the battlefield. This thing does not need help traversing any faster. It works in the E75 and also the 4TP. I know, you guys were just super worried about this one. I know a lot of people will be pleased to hear it works very, very nicely in the Char Future. Just look at the speed increase. The 430U was an interesting case. It actually goes slower doing this trick, which doesn't make a ton of sense because it doesn't spin that fast to begin with. But it actually goes about the same or slower, which is interesting because it's a middle turret instead of any of the other ones that have done this. I very briefly touched on this earlier, but it doesn't work in tank destroyers. They actually spin the exact same speed, whether you're handbrake turning or not handbrake turning. All this does is add a bit of backwards movement on top of whatever turning you were doing in the first place. Because as you can see, as soon as we stop turning, the tank turns at the same speed. Now it's just turning on its reverse. That's how it works for first gear ones anyways. Third gear ones will still turn a little bit because only one track is moving. Speaking of which, this is how you can tell the difference right away if you have a first or a third gear shift system for turning. Really the only way, but also the simplest and the fastest way is just turn. If it's a first gear shifting system, both tracks will be moving at hopefully the same rate, as you can see with the Caliban here, versus the WZ that Will is driving, where you can see one track moving considerably faster than the other. You can see the left track is moving very quickly compared to the right track. The other way to tell is just, again, by turning. Your tank should move forwards or backwards depending on what button you have pressed. If you press A, just the right track will move, and if you press D, the left track will move forwards. You can just tell because your tank will go forwards while it's turning, as opposed to just sitting in place and turning a 180 on the spot. I'm leaving this entire clip in just so you can see what it's like when a third gear tries this trick, or at least some third gears. You can see the turn is slowly slowing down or losing speed when we go backwards. And it's a third gear system because you can just tell based on the fact that the tank is moving forwards while it's turning, as you can see there. However, when you go backwards, you can see it bottom out like the FCM did. I have no idea why this happens. So far, the tanks that have done this are the TVP, the FCM, PZ1C, and the Kleinwagen. You know, those tanks are all totally related to each other in like 0 categories, which makes this so much more confusing. The other thing that makes this confusing is that only the PZ1C and the Kleinwagen did this. It came back around. It sped up again, and then slowed back down and went straight again. There's so many reasons that this is confusing, and I have no idea why it's just some tanks with different systems, but also sometimes the same system on completely different parameters of entire spectrums of the tech tree. Like a PZ1C and a Kleinwagen. It is hard to find two tanks more different than those two, because one's all the way at the bottom of the tech tree in the tiers, and the other's all the way at the top. One's got tons of armor on the turret, the other's got none. One has a turret mounted in the front, one has one mounted in the back. One of them weighs not even 15 tons, and the other weighs over 40. So this doesn't make any sense, honestly. If you want to try this for yourself, and I highly recommend you do, because you never know when this could help you in a random battle, go into a training room, share this video with a friend, and tell them we gotta try this, because this is some interesting stuff. If you do want to try this, hold space, which should be your handbrake button, unless you've put it onto something else. Usually a fire extinguisher is what people have put spacebar on in the past. And you can hold S, because the tank won't move when you're holding S, and then hold the D key once you've held those two keys down. Your tank may do what you see on the screen here, that the bat chat is doing, if it is a first gear shifting tank. If it's a third gear shifting tank, and it's not very quick, like a Kanonenpanzer 07, then it probably won't work. Or it'll make your tank slower, which is not what you want. However, if it's a first gear shifting tank, it should work just fine. At least somewhat. There's a couple exceptions, that's why you should try this, because you don't know if your favorite tank is an exception. I honestly never would have guessed that an FCM 50T wouldn't work, and a TVP wouldn't work, but a Kleinwagen, an OI, and a TOG would work. It just seems random to me. And if anyone has a good explanation, do let me know in the comments, because the only thing I've heard is track tension, so Magoo is the one that gave that idea to me. He may be right, he may be wrong. I have no idea, because I don't have any better ideas as to how this works, and it just doesn't make sense to me. Normally I ask, or at least I don't really ask that, like, share, like this, follow the channel, subscribe, turn on notifications, but do share this with your friends, because you don't know when this could be useful, where it could be useful, what tanks it could be useful in, or what tanks it works in. We only tested about 25, and the only two consistent things we found were that, one, it doesn't work in tank destroyers or SPGs, and two, it doesn't work in slow third gear shifting tanks. It can work in fast third gear shifting tanks, but it just seems a bit random. It also seems a bit random that it only works when you turn counterclockwise, but not clockwise. Holding S and D and handbrake works, but holding A and S and handbrake doesn't work. Another random thing is just it decides not to work for some tanks, like the FCM, the TVP, the VK101 didn't work either. Some tanks turn slower trying this, even though it still turns. Like the 430U turned a little slower or the same. The Astron Rex turned slower. The T71 turned slower, which those are tanks that probably don't need to do this anyways. But it's still interesting that that's the case. So share this video with people and try this out for yourself, because you never know when this could come in handy. Or when. This could completely mess with people's muscle memory as well, and maybe save you in a couple situations. You never know until you try and figure it out. Yeah, see you next Friday with another video.